All right, good morning. Building on the fascinating discussions we've had so far, hearing Dr. D'Angelo share his vision for the future, hearing Dr. Tracy recount his inspiring journey from bench to bedside, and recalling the valuable lessons that we've heard over the last several sessions, we turn our attention to what I think is the critical next step, as Jill had said. Here we're going to talk about integrating bioelectronic medicine into clinical practice to make it available to address, underserved medical needs. And I think, as many people have already said, this is really a pivotal moment as we look to translate innovation into direct patient impact. So let's start off, to kick off the discussion. Let me invite our panelists to introduce themselves and share their roles and their interests.
Hello, everyone. Hubert Lim. I'm a University of Minnesota professor in biomedical engineering and otolaryngology, also serving as the director of the Earl Medical Devices Center. We serve as the bridge for bringing the medtech ecosystem with the university, industry, government locally, but also worldwide. Relevant for this discussion, I've been in the cochlear implant field for 20 plus years. It's amazing success stories, but there's a lot of barriers that still linger around after 20 plus years. So we could get into that. And the other hat, involved with two companies, Chief Scientific Officer of Neuromod Devices. We make a tongue stimulator for tinnitus treatment. I thought that we could do the science, run the clinical trials, get FDA approval, get good results, and life would be good and it would be easy. But then the pain and barriers started at that point. We are in commercial reach to the patients, but I think that also I can share a little bit of some observations there. And then relevant to here, Chief Scientific Officer of Second Wave Systems. We're developing ultrasound technologies to stimulate the spleen for treating anti-inflammatory conditions. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Great.
I'm Len Calabrese. Been a lot of loose talk about rheumatologists this morning. I actually have rheumatologists, so I'm here to stand up for us. I am a professor of medicine, and I've been engaged in clinical care of this disease since the beginning of my career. Research as a clinical immunologist, primarily focused on the safety of the revolution of biologics. And I have a forthright track record of medical education, which has been for 25 years preparing rheumatologists for the next iteration of advances in immunology, and we're here, so that's what I do.
I'm thrilled to be sitting next to you. It's wonderful. Don't let anybody say anything otherwise. I've got your back. I'm Amy Rockland. I'm CEO of the Complex Disorders Alliance. We're also known as CODA. We are a disease research foundation led by patients. We were founded by Fiji Simo, who is publicly a patient in our space, and I'll explain what that is in just a moment. Fiji is the CEO of Open Applications at OpenAI, and she was formerly CEO of Instacart. She has been on a chronic illness journey for many years, and like many who have told their story before, she had access to some of the best care that is available today, many, many connections, and has found herself living with very limiting chronic illness. So Fiji started us as a data-driven research system that would help move this entire ecosystem forward, consider us a force multiplier for our patients. And our patients fall under many indications and often get multiple diagnoses, which can include long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome, post-acute Lyme disease, endometriosis, chronic migraine, connective tissue disorders, mast cell activation syndrome, and irritable bowel syndrome, which Kevin has spoken about quite a bit. And because of that huge gut interface between the neurological and immune system, I do think offers a key to many of our patients' suffering. What we see is that what is happening in this cascade of multi-systemic aspects of these conditions is that there is a dysfunction in the crosstalk between the neurological system and the immune system. So when I'm here today, I can tell you that probably I'm one of the most excited to be here, because we have a patient population that numbers in the hundreds of millions, 400 million people have been diagnosed with long COVID worldwide. Like, take a moment to digest that and compare that to other diseases. We have 80% women, as we've been talking about, more severely, and we don't know why it's impacting them as severely as it is. The last thing I'll tell you is I am the mom of a patient. I have lived this space, and I have seen what it's done to families. My daughter Grace was 16 12 years ago, and suddenly and unknowingly, she really lost her life overnight. It was sudden onset of chronic pain, chronic dizziness, inability to stand. Her autonomic nervous system went into complete dysfunction. And despite the fact that I was in disease research myself, working with some of the leading oncology research organizations today, I was very ill-equipped to help my daughter navigate this journey. So what I'm seeing in terms of promise for bioelectronic medicine is that you have the ability to start helping patients that have no approved therapies today. They have a very, very complicated experience in the clinic. And if we can narrow down some of their diagnoses to this miscommunication between the neurological and immune system and have a device that addresses that, you are opening up the door to future health like none of these patients currently expect. So I'm thrilled to be here today, and I'm just grateful to all of you for being in this room.
All right, well, thank you. So we've heard a lot about devices and innovation, but let's talk about patients and disease. And maybe as the proud rheumatologist on the board, we're going to start with you, Len. Maybe can you provide us with a 30,000-foot view of the journey for rheumatoid arthritis patients and provide some of the background and history of what got us to the current treatments today?
You know, it's an incredible story. This disease has been codified for 3 centuries, and up until 75 years ago, we treated it with salicylates, aspirin, and salts of gold, and it didn't do much. Took the edge off. The first disruptive advance was the discovery of cortisone, Nobel Prize-winning work in 1950, which every rheumatologist in the world will tell you is the greatest drug ever invented to treat acute inflammation, still is, and the worst drug ever invented to treat chronic inflammation.
Yeah.
And for the first half of my career, our waiting room was littered with wheelchairs and assist devices, and the orthopedists couldn't keep up with the requirement to replace joints from rheumatoid arthritis, including fingers and toes and hips and knees. I witnessed the second disruptive advance with biologics, and as I said, I have studied the safety signal for these ever since. And, biologics are expensive, and they carry prevalent risks of serious and opportunistic infections. Yet, we have got rid of the wheelchairs and the assist devices at significant costs. And if, as an immunologist, brain immune access to me 10 to 15 years ago was kind of a theoretic notion. And today we are entering the third disruptive advance in the treatment of this disease. And, there's tremendous excitement and level 1 evidence of its use. Yet I see, many challenges ahead in terms of clinician adoption, building confidence in declarative and procedural knowledge about how you do this and what does it mean to my patients. And most of all, and my research of the past decade has largely been focused on empathic communication and establishing relationships with patients. There's a lot of heavy lifting, as we've heard, to be done, and I think it's an exciting forefront.
Yeah, and Lynn, let me ask you a follow-up. As I'm a practicing nephrologist, and as I read studies and see new therapies, I almost immediately can think of a patient in my practice or a cohort of patients that therapy would really benefit. Are there patients that come to mind immediately for you about that would really benefit from a therapy like SetPoint?
Well, the entry criteria for the pivotal study, these are the patients that we're interested in. These are people that have had standard of care that have not done well, that still have active disease, the preponderance of which are still on glucocorticoids. As I told you, this is not where we want to be. We want to get rid of these as chronic diseases. So, theoretically, there's a wide swatch of patients that are eligible for this, and as I say, I'm eager to have these discussions to work through finding the right patient for the right therapy. So for sure.
Yeah, and certainly opening up to the group, just thinking from the patient perspective, how might bioelectronic medicine fundamentally alter that treatment experience for our patients?
I would say that first of all, having an effective therapy, you can't underestimate that. You don't have effective therapies for certain patients. And I think that having that ability to offer a new treatment and therapy that has efficacy to it is absolutely instrumental. So for us, really, as we're talking about multisystemic disease, as Len has highlighted, really, to me, this is the starting point of something that could be transformative for a patient population that's often siloed by specialty. They just move from specialty to specialty, and no one clinician is able to help them until now. And so I think for patients, really, it's about offering a choice.
And Hubert, beyond efficacy, are there things around compliance, side effects that you might think of for your patients?
Yeah, well, kind of stepping back a little bit with adoption and compliance, I think what's interesting about the challenges you heard earlier with adoption, I'll share a little bit with cochlear implant field. Many of you know with the device you have an implant electrode that goes into the snail-looking thing in your cochlea, restores hearing for individuals who are completely deaf. The criteria have been relaxed to allow for those who have some hearing, and even now unilateral. Children as young as 4 months, 5 months are being implanted now. So for all purposes, it's a success story. Do you know how much the penetration is right now for that? Less than 10%, 3 to 5% over 30 years of this development. And what's been causing that, and I think it's interesting to learn for this field too, and obviously it's complex, and I don't know all of what even our companies are moving towards to do to overcome these barriers. Reimbursement is important, but one of the unique things about bioelectronic medicine, which getting to the compliance and side effects, is that you can change the parameters, as mentioned earlier, and we can adjust it for the patients, and that's a blessing, but it's also a curse because you get reimbursement for the surgery, but then you need to create an infrastructure to be able to sustain that. In the cochlear implant field, that has been very difficult. The cost that goes into maintaining that ecosystem with fitting and refining has been a barrier that they haven't been able to overcome, and the experts who will be doing that. Patient education awareness about side effects and compliance. We're seeing this quite a bit with cochlear implants. It is rare to see complications in the cochlear implant field, but in clinics that are doing it, maybe they shouldn't be doing it, and also in terms of implanting individuals who may not be the right candidates, though that information is spreading, and it has spread quite rapidly, that the media and the patient communities are holding on to that information. And so being able to upfront talk about these side effects, talk about what's happening, and educating the patient population, I think is critical.
And just kind of following up on some of the practical implications for the flow within the office. I bet your office, who does cochlear implants, is set up very different than Len's practice. And as you kind of think through kind of those clinical workflows, what kind of infrastructure will be required in the offices for both, deployment and follow-up of these devices?
Yeah, I think that's a very important question, a challenging one. For cochlear implants, and I think actually bioelectronic medicine is a unique positive place, so I'll lead with that. In cochlear implant field, what happens is you have these specialized centers, and you're going to have referrals from primary care, audiologists, and other ENTs, but they've developed this lifelong patient in their clinics, and they sell hearing aids and they sell other treatments for their patients, and now you're asking them to refer to these centers their patients, but also now they have, it's important for the patient, but also incentives and how they're going to direct that, and I think that's going to be an interesting.
I agree with all that, but I think that before this, there are unmet needs that are not merely transactional. And, if you go back to the introduction of the biologic era, I can remember the feeling of like, I'm not going to engage in this. I'm not going to induce an iatrogenic immune deficiency. This is scary stuff. I'm not a cytokine biologist, and there is a rapid learning curve that must be overcome. And as I say, all of you who are involved in devices, when you're moving into, you've treated seizures and migraines and depression and all this, treating immune-mediated inflammatory diseases with a device, this is a radical shift. And if the consuming audience of practitioners is going to do this, they have to be confident that they understand this science, which has been on the periphery, and be able to translate that to meet not only to satisfy and relieve the complaints of their patients, but more importantly to address their concerns. And unless you're confident in knowledge about this, this is going to be a very, very heavy lift. But and I think everyone recognizes that. But this is where the rubber meets the road here.
So then, following up on that, what do you think is the path to widespread adoption? Does it start in our academic centers and move out? How would you see that progressing over the next decade?
I see a need to interject neuroimmunology into the curricula of virtually every major educational meeting that is held in the global rheumatology community. I mean, believe me, as someone who's chaired national and international meetings, this is not a topic that is, at the forefront. Yeah. So all of a sudden, with this whiplash of this approval of very impressive therapy, this needs to be, placed front and center.
Yeah.
Hubert, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, well, also just to add is education, but the technical aspect. I think when I talk to my rheumatology colleagues at University of Minnesota and elsewhere, there is a bit, not resistance, but I feel it's more not understanding the technology and what it's doing, to your point, Leonard, about the science, but also finding ways that education could come into the training now, right, because devices are here to stay, and they're going to have to be understood to be accepted. So I think that's an important piece.
Right. Okay, Amy, let's flip a little bit to advocacy and patient need. What role do you think advocacy groups play in highlighting new therapies? How would a nonprofit like CODA partner to build patient trust and advocate for continued research and innovation?
So first and foremost, as CODA, we are a disease-focused foundation, and so we connect with our patients a little bit differently because we're approaching this in a data-driven way. So some of the things that we're seeing for these complex patients is much of their care can be hypothesis-driven, and it's presented to them often in ways that it is cemented. So I think the opportunity here is to partner with Dr. Tracy and others to instill a clinical trial that actually starts to show efficacy and teaches our patients around how these upstream causes are cascading and causing their downstream symptoms. A lot of times what's happening is their diagnoses are misleading in that they think they suffer from autonomic dysfunction just as a disease almost, where really that autonomic dysfunction is coming as a result of perhaps inflammation or poor immune crosstalk. So I think we could first bring some scientific rigor to the patient community so we could get out in front to start educating in the right way. I think also building trust with the patients and not overpromising and making sure that we start to run studies to stratify and segment patients that actually are going to respond the best. Everyone's talked about this, but really understanding what should we be measuring in the patient community? What is going to be helpful towards that segmentation? How do we understand who will respond? And really, this is a patient community that has been let down over and over again. So what is our biggest risk is actually our greatest chance at success, which is when you do see something work well, the adoption is actually going to be something that patients are going to be seeking. And so I think it's really the education is so intertwined with scientific rigor and research-based approach, and that's why we're super excited to be involved.
And I agree with all of that. And while I focused on practitioner education, the rheumatoid arthritis patient advocacy groups are very highly organized, and I'm sure are stepping up to respond to the broad interest of the RA population that are just getting kind of little glimpses of what this potential is. So they need to be brought on board big time.
So let's transition a little bit to talk a little bit more deeply about physician education. So I think one of the challenges we often face, and multiple people have said it, is the effectively bringing new advances to practicing physicians and trainees. Bioelectronic devices, I think, pose unique challenges beyond what we saw in biologicals and other pharmaceuticals. So can you discuss some of those challenges and potential solutions for us?
Well, as I say, if you try to recapitulate the introduction of biologics, this created, an entirely new lexicon of educational initiatives. We're talking going from antimetabolites to, monoclonal antibodies. Similarly, this is a major shift in educational goals and objectives. And as I said, we have robust educational networks on a global basis in rheumatology. And, until the last year, you could count the number of presentations on, your hands or toes or something like this. And so this now needs to be introduced not only at the level of the practitioner and the advanced practitioner, very important, not just physicians, but APs, but in our training. And, we have 50 rheumatologists in our group, it's one of the largest groups in the country. And the vast majority of them are just kind of knocking on the doors going like, what are we going to do about this? And so I think that leading with, centers that have experience and working relationships with invasive neurosurgeons and developing model educational programs that then can be recapitulated is where this has got to go.
And I'll add to that, the neurosurgery, the rheumatology, but also now the technical piece, the biomedical engineers and the engineers are going to come into this mix. With cochlear implants, you have audiologists who are designated to fit these devices. Audiology in the US was interesting. It ended up becoming a doctor degree. And so there's a limited bandwidth of individuals who can actually do it in the US. In Germany, where I worked for my postdoc, they allow technicians and engineers, skilled technicians, to do it. But even there's a limited bandwidth to sustain that. So I do think choosing and how we're going to put the technical piece into that mix to create an infrastructure that can sustain. The optimism here is this is going to scale up. We're going to find a lot of patients for different conditions, and how we're going to support that infrastructure, yes, on the surgical side, medical side, but on the maintenance optimization side. I think that's where the exciting piece is, but also the big challenge of how to sustain that is going to be interesting.
Great, and we have just under 30 seconds, so I'm going to ask you all to answer this question really quickly. What kind of real-world evidence will be crucial to solidify clinician confidence and drive broader adoption beyond initial adopters?
I'll just say finding responders, predictive capabilities, because that's going to enable people to have more confidence in it, and then also be able to go through the surgery and other aspects to drive it forward. So that's going to be critical.
I want meticulous long-term extension data. I want to know the effects on non-articular manifestations such as nociplastic pain, fibromyalgia, fatigue, post-exertional malaise, and the effects on autonomic function and whether that serves as a biomarker.
Great. Amy?
Yeah, I echo what Len just said. I think longitudinal data is going to be critical to this, but defining the right endpoints for this patient population is unique, and I think how we do that is going to be really critical to the overall success of this device in
Great.
particular.
Thank you all.